Good evening. We are studying one of this week's parashiot. It's a double parasha, so it's Chukat and Balak. We're going to be learning a little about Chukat. And the way this parsha begins is Zot Chukat HaTorah. This is the statute of the Torah, like as if this is the entire statute, so to speak. This is establishing a connection between the type of mitzvot that are called chukim and the entire Torah. This word chok comes from the root of to engrave. And usually when you physically engraving something, it's a hard job. And in a sense, this is teaching us one of the first keys in our commitment to the Torah to make the divine potential that we each possess grow and blossom. We need to sometimes put in this hard work. Another lesson which we receive from this word chuk, and the chok, like a engravement, can be appreciated when we compare writing and engraving. When one writes, the surface upon which we wrote and the ink which we used remain two separate entities. It's just that the ink is becoming on top of it, so to speak. However, when someone does engraving on stone, so to speak, or on wood, the writing and the stone become a single entity. They are inseparable. So this teaches us the importance of really internalizing Torah, making the teachings of the Torah part of our being. So there's an advantage to sometimes when we even compel ourselves to observe Torah, even if it's against our nature. But truly the deepest commitment to this service is when we truly remake our nature to reflect this will, and that's the engraving, that it became a part of us. So the Chukim teach us that the person in the Torah, we should become one entity, not separate, not like the ink and the paper, rather it becomes engraved on us. And this approach really brings to true growth, because we proceed past the limited perspectives, our own perception, and we go into the unlimited levels which the Torah brings us to. And these teachings that we said, that the Torah becomes an engravement on us, leads to a third interpretation of chokim, of this word of engraving, that the term refers to the dimensions of the Torah which surpass our understanding. So when a person develops their commitment to Torah, the person comes to the awareness that every facet of the Torah, even those which appear to be within the grasp of our mortal intellect, really they are above limitation, because the Torah is a wisdom. Just as the Rambam Maimonides says, a created being cannot truly comprehend the Creator, so we cannot comprehend God's attributes. As He is the knower, He is the knowledge itself, it's one. So in a sense, the Torah is really, even when we do understand our intellect, so to speak, it's higher. Just going deeper into the name of the Parsha. This Parsha, Chukat, actually spans a period of 40 years almost. Why? First discusses the laws of the red heifer, which were set on the 1st of Nisan, which was actually before the sin of the spies and Korach's rebellion, which we just read in the last few weeks. And then, after we read about the red heifer, the Torah jumps almost 40 years to discuss the passing of Miriam and Aaron and the conquest of Sichon and Og. So why is the Torah doing this? Why is the Torah backtracking to a time before the sin of the spies and then jumping again to the end of the Jewish people's journey in the desert? So to answer this question, we're going to first go to another issue that seems a bit puzzling. Near the end of the Parsha, Moses sends spies to Yazer, which seems a little similar to the spies that he had sent almost 40 years before. So you would think that after we were sentenced to wander in the desert for almost 40 years, we learned our lesson and we wouldn't do the same thing of sending the spies after the first mistake. But it seems that the spies' errors seem to be repeated. The first, what are they? The first spies deviated from the mission they were assigned. So too in the Parsha, Moshe sent men to spy out Yazer. Instead of merely collecting information as Moses told them, they actually captured the villages. So they didn't do what Moshe said, they actually did some conquering themselves. And in this Parsha, after conquering the land of Sichon, the Jewish people, it says they settled in all the cities of the Amorites in Heshbon and all its villages. Why did they settle in these lands rather than entering the land of Israel? It seems that it's also resembling the sin of the first spies. But the truth is that it's the very opposite. This sending of the spies, the last spies now, is very different. The Jewish people of this generation did not repeat the sin of the spies, but they were trying to correct it by showing additional enthusiasm about conquering the land of Israel. So when Moshe sent the spies, they didn't just look at the land, they actually captured its villages. And God told them they were going to conquer the land of the 7 nations. They nevertheless desired to settle in the lands of Sichon and Og, because these were part of the extended borders of Israel that were promised to Avram. So they were trying to expand the borders in a sense. And that's why, the reason why the Parsha begins with a passage which was said before the sin of the spies, for through their enthusiasm to enter the land that we read about here, the Jewish people succeeded in correcting the sin of the spies, and thereby reaching their prior spiritual level that they had attained before the sin. Shalom, Louise and David. Hope you're doing well. We're speaking about why in this week's Parsha it jumps around a lot. It basically jumps almost 40 years, because the red heifer happened at the beginning of the 40 years, and then it jumps to the end of the 40 years. And it's teaching us that although Moses sent spies, and it seems that these spies also deviated, it's the opposite. They were doing a rectification, and that's why they conquered land. Not only they brought a report, but they conquered land. And this message that we just said is reflected in the name of the Parsha, Chukat. Chukat, like we said, is chakika, which means engraving. So we see that the desire of the nation to inhabit the entire land of Israel that was promised to Avram, to an extent that the love of the land totally permeated their hearts and mind, like it was engraved in their being. And that's why they actually did this conquering, because it was so deeply a root need of them. So we said that the portion begins, this is the command of the Torah. This is the command, so to speak. And it's a command which is above intellect even. And so when we look at it on a deeper level, the mitzvah of the red heifer is called the super rational command of the Torah, because it conveys a message which is very fundamental to living the Torah. The spiritual root of all existence is always moving. It's not a status thing. Just like our heart always continuously contracts and then relaxes, our lungs inhale and exhale, so too the spiritual life force of this planet and everything fluctuate. The spiritual life force is always fluctuating in a constant cycle of coming back and going up. It's like emanation and withdrawal, coming down and going up. Everything is alive, and everything is being brought into existence constantly by Hashem, and its inner core is always pulsating energy. And the Kabbalists call this cycle, it's called in Hebrew, Ratzah V'Shov, running up and coming down. Running towards the spirituality and then returning it to the lower reality. So how does this reflect in our physical lives or our spiritual lives? But both. Ratzah is the desire for transcendence that we have. And when it's really powerful, the yearning to escape from the physical existence and merge with Hashem and divinity and spirituality. And generally speaking, it is the drive to elevate the world by stretching it past its material limits, to try to lift it closer to Hashem. When we study, this ratzol, this running up, is expressed as the drive to explore and innovate new ideas, that we're not content with our present knowledge. We want to go deeper and deeper and higher. And in practical observance, this helps ensure that we do not stagnate at our present level. We're always looking to grow in our spirituality and our mitzvot and Torah. Nevertheless, this ratzol, part of it is kind of egotistical, a little bit of it. Why? All forms of love, even love of God, are a personal desire. So when it's left to its own devices, this ratzol may fulfill the person's desire to leave the world and come closer to Hashem, but Hashem wants people to bring it back down here in this physical world where we were created. So even though there's the positive effect of this running up, that it lifts up our perception and our aspirations above the physical world and gets us spiritual, we need to have the shov, the bringing it down. This is the sense of responsibility and discipline that help us redirect our ambitions, that all these spiritual ambitions, it helps us bring it down to the world and make it more practical. And this helps us draw this spirituality and godliness into this world through emphasizing practical ways in which we could bring the spirituality down. It's kind of like a spiritual pause before the next elevation begins. So we internalize the high levels that we reached, making sure they become part of our nature and our character. So this represents bringing one's, so to speak, questions into a final resolution, making it more real and concrete. And this is generally it's the discipline commitment to a Torah life that we're motivated by really accepting the yoke of the commandments. So it's both, that we bring it up and we then bring it down. And the red heifer, so we said the red heifer is this super rational command. It is the chukah life, because the red heifer is a combination of both of these things, of running up and bringing it down. First, they burn the cow completely. This is the passionate elevation of running up. But then we bring the ash and make it sprinkling water, which is like the shov, the bringing it down. Water always flows downwards until it settles in a flat place. And this is the lesson that just as both fire and water are necessary in preparing the red heifer, this tension between the ratzah and shov is the running up and bringing it down is the essence of our relationship with Hashem and the principle of the Torah. Just like we said, the spiritual life of the world is always running up and coming down. It's the same in us. We have this, and we need both. We can't just be stuck on one. We need to elevate ourselves, and at the same time, we need to bring ourselves back down into this world and make our spiritual comprehensions more feasible and real in the reality, to help not just us, but those around us in this physical world. That's what Hashem desires. In this week's Parsha, we also read about Miriam's well. So something obviously we all know about water is that water assists the digestive system to break down food, and the water within the bloodstream carries those nutrients to all parts of the body. And this, in a sense, represents the mission of the women of our nation. They bring the well of living water, the Torah, to nourish all segments of the Jewish people, even those who totally lack knowledge of it. Thus, we see that while in Egypt, Miriam devoted herself to small children, and her heroic efforts led to the annulment of Pharaoh's decree against children. And it was in her merit that the well water came, since water represents the dissemination of Torah. So when a mother or a sister or a teacher educates a child, we witness the modern day living waters of Miriam, that sustained the Jewish people in exile, giving us the ability to go peaceful to our current sojourn in the desert of exile. In addition to providing water to drink, Miriam's well also made it possible for family purity to be fulfilled. There was no other source of water in the desert, so Miriam's well was the mikvah, and that brought this mitzvah of family purity to the nation. And the custom of drawing water on Motzei Shabbat is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. This suggests that it's applicable today, and spiritually, like that we get water on Motzei Shabbat, this helps us connect to the well of Miriam, and that it should be a healthy week spiritually and physically. Thank you guys, and thank you for tuning in. Always a pleasure. Hope you guys have a great night, and God bless you. Thank you so much.